A band of white men came to the Rocky Mountains in the 1820s, not to settle the land, but to exploit it. They were capitalists, adventurers, or simply hired labor. And within 20 years of their arrival, most had disappeared. The product of their enterprise was the pelt of the North American beaver. Their byproduct was, well, I guess you might say, a presence in the imagination that remains undiminished to this day. They call themselves mountain men. Fort Bridger, Wyoming is just off Interstate 80. And each year the summer ends here with a curious event. Here gather today's mountain men. They regard themselves as the spiritual progeny of men like Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith, and Thomas Fitzpatrick.
We thought you were an answer this year. I called through an awful lot of bad stuff.
This annual 3-day event is called the Rendezvous. It's meant to be an evocation, if not exactly a recreation, of the yearly gathering of the mountain men. Men who came out of the mountain valleys to exchange a year's catch of beaver skins for supplies, entertainment, and news.
This one here are made out of a badger hide.
These men are cabinet makers, engineers, and salesmen. They bring their families and pitch their lodges. If they come out of a necessity, it is it's a psychological one, to escape a modern life devoid of adventure. And it isn't really a rendezvous now, it's just
see what a lodge looks like, how it goes up, how people actually lived in them.
Worst thing about it is scratching your forehead up on the inside.
Dollar piece, and you won't get buffalo anywhere else.
I had a man offer me a part in the movie, which included this movie, this part of this uniform. And so when I seen what it done to the people, I automatically took it over.
site. Started with 17 lodges, and now we're up to 130 some. I think I admire a lifestyle that was enjoyed a long time ago by people who were free, had less of an obligation to society. The lifestyle of the Indian, for instance, these were people that we greatly admire, the way they used to live. Well, I think it's a great opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people, particularly those that are interested in perpetuating a lifestyle and recreating a portion of our American history. We need to know what our forefathers have gone through. Also, we try to learn crafts that our forefathers and grandfathers actually could do. It's a lot easier than doing it with a match. I was a trapper in the UNM Mountains, just behind us here, for about 12 years. Paid my way through school, become an engineer. Now I'm back in the mountains. Ready on the firing line, commence fire! It's just a heritage and part of life that most people say that we were born 150 years too late, which is probably true. May the spirit of Mother Earth and the spirit of the Father in the heavens enter our pipe, that those who speak here tonight will speak with good words.
There are a few, however, who carry the fantasy just a little bit further. Kurt Gleave is one who spends many weekends trapping. Kurt often traps primitive style. His equipment and techniques are not greatly different from those used by the 19th century mountain men. This is experiencing some of the discomfort of the real thing.
It's a lot harder life than we live today. We try to make our own equipment the way they did. We make our own teepees and shelters, guns and other weapons. We just like to get out and try to do it, and trapping has always been a main part of the mountain men, and I wanted to learn, and the skins, we will trade them at rendezvous for other accoutrements and possibles that we need. if the beaver is skinned properly, he will turn out perfectly round. Then we take the skin, stretch it on a board. The old way was on a willow hoop, but we use a board. We stretch them on. It makes it a lot easier to flesh the animal. And what I mean by fleshing is removing the excess fat, the meat that is on there from the skinning job. We make a lot of our own clothing and things from them. They're very soft and a beautiful, beautiful fur. This trap is much like the one the mountain man used in the 1830s. When the first thing we looked for was we looked to see if the pond is active. And the way we do this is to look for fresh cuttings, runs, where they leave the pond and enter the pond to gather their food supply. And in one of these runs, we'll set this trap in 5 to 6 inches of water. And then the chain is usually about 5 feet long. We'll set the trap next to the bank, take the chain out into the pond as far as it'll stretch away from the trap. We'll stake it down with the stake. With the idea being that when the beaver comes to the bait, which I should mention is supplied by the animal himself. It's castor, castrum, musk, called by different names. After the trap is set in the 5 to 6 inches of water, we'll take a stick and we carry this castrum in a bottle. We'll dip the stick into it, set it 4 inches or so above the trap. This caster has a very strong attraction, and when he comes with his mouth to reach up for the bait, his feet automatically come down into the trap. The beaver's natural instinct is to head for deep water. And this is what he'll do. He might also circle around this stake until it draws him right down, and the trap, weighing about 5 pounds,
hounds will start to weigh him down, and finally the beaver drowns.
The names themselves conjure the legends. Bridger, Fitzpatrick, Jed Smith. What kind of men were they? Fred Gowans is Associate Professor of Indian Studies and History at Brigham Young University. And he's written quite a lot on the era of the mountain man.
I think it's very, very hard for you and me in this 20th century to even comprehend what a horrible, rugged, lonely, cruel life that must have been. Jim Bridger made the statement in the 1840 rendezvous, which was the last one. He says, as near as I can see, I'm the only mountain man here today that was at the 1825 one. And he says, and most of those men are dead, killed by the bars or the grizz, killed by Indians, or just killed by Mother Nature. When a rendezvous broke loose in July of every year, and the mountain man didn't show up, you were considered dead until you did show up. It's hard to comprehend what it must have been like in the middle of November, working up into your armpits in the rivers, setting your traps, and coming out of those rivers in soaking buckskin when the temperature was below freezing, to be walking through a thicket and be attacked by a grizzly bear, or in numbers which you think gave you some kind of safety to be attacked by a group of Blackfoot Indians who want nothing more than to take your head.
The mountain man suffered these privations to support the fashion trade of the eastern U.S. and Europe. The beaver hat was the primary end product of the beaver fur. It was durable, handsome, and throughout the first half of the 19th century was very fashionable. Prior to 1825 and the first rendezvous, the bulk of the beaver skins had been supplied from the Canadian trading posts on the upper Missouri River. The traders depended on tribes of Indians to trap the beaver in exchange for blankets and foodstuffs, weapons, and trinkets, what have you. Keelboats plied the river, taking supplies to the trading posts and bringing the pelts downriver to St. Louis, headquarters for the major It was a combination of greed and circumstance which changed all that. The price of beaver skins was raising. In St. Louis, William Ashley, later to become a United States Senator, advertised for 100 men to establish new trading posts further upriver in the Rockies. This mountain wilderness was not unknown. Ever since the Lewis and Clark expedition, men were aware of the vast reaches of land beyond the mountains, land rich with beaver. But Ashley, well, he ran into bad luck right away. One of his first boats upriver was wrecked with the loss of $10,000 worth of goods. The following spring, in 1823, Ashley set out with 2 more boats. This time the problem was Indians. A wreck dotted the Missouri and the Dakotas. The attack came. Ashley lost 10 men in his boat. Only the most resourceful, among them Jed Smith, survived. $100,000 in debt. Ashley decided to send what remained of the trade goods with the survivors overland to the Yellowstone River area.
When his men arrived in the Wyoming area, they spent the winter of 23 and 24 with the Crow Indians along the Wind River Mountains. These Indians told them of a pass that took them south of the Great Wind River Range. Of course, today we know this is the famous South Pass. In the spring of 24, these men representing Ashley went into what we know as the Green River country. They found a bonanza of beaver, and this is what gave birth to the mountain men.
The Indians of that area were not trappers, so the mountain men had to assume that role to harvest the beaver. The beaver hunt was seasonal. The trappers moved down the mountain streams as they began to freeze in the fall, and then upstream again in the spring thaw. Winter brought an awesome silence to the mountain. This was the time when nature revealed her severest character. For the mountain man, unable to trap frozen streams,
many times that he must have told that story around the campfires, those stories got blown completely out of proportion. And it's interesting to note that this goes on today.
I said, hey, Bill, there's a 4.5-foot salmon here. He said, yeah. Then we catch a trout like this. Bill went to the other side of the creek. But when he got over there, the salmon kind of came out in the middle. Bill through the spirit of me, I get up to stab it, and salmon goes the other way, and I threw the spear the other way, and this went on for
The rendezvous that are held now, there are actually contests held where men get up around the campfire, the council fire at night, and try to tell the most hair-raising story, to tell the story that's the most preposterous story that they can dream up.
Get out, run out, jump out, swim, chew more tobacco and spit less, drink more whiskey and keep sober, outthink, outfight, outbrag, outdance any natural man, live forever, and turn to white oak post.
Spring finally comes to the mountains. It comes with a great rush. Trapper took his best pelts in the spring. But now with the trapping year completed, it was necessary to get the furs back to St. Louis to replenish his goods and equipment for the common trapping season. The rendezvous was invented to accomplish this purpose. Now, I actually held the first rendezvous on a grassy plain near the Utah-Wyoming border along Henry's Fork of the Green River.
The rendezvous site itself basically needed two main things: water and forage. And if you were to look at the 16 different rendezvous that were held between 1825 and 1840, you would see that this is the exact type of thing that had been picked. A place where there was a lot of water and a place where there was much forage. When you stop to think that it was not uncommon to have maybe 400 or 500 mountain men gathered at a realizing that the whole mode of transportation was based upon either horse or mule. You can imagine the number of animals that had been gathered together.
The first rendezvous of 1825 lasted a day. It was unique because, well, Ashley didn't bring any liquor. He corrected this the next year. And old Ashley, he found that supplying the mountain men was more to his liking. And he sold out his company to some of the trappers. The rendezvous which followed stretched into weeks. Weeks filled with trading and outfitting and drinking and games and, sharing of tales and news.
Let's not kid ourselves. The rendezvous became drunken orgies. Men were killed at rendezvous. The battle where Kit Carson killed the big French bully who was picking on everybody at the rendezvous up at the Green River rendezvous one year. Finally, they actually had a duel on horseback with pistols, and Kit Carson came out the winner.
Now, this kind of epic behavior is what the reputation of the mountain man is built on. But it completely ignores the long, grueling hours of work that, in fact, occupied most of his life. Now, there's a museum of the fur trade in Chadron, Nebraska, that collects artifacts and information about the mountain men. A fellow by the name of Charles Hanson Jr. is a curator.
The mountain man is one of our prime folklore heroes today, and you have to build a few myths to make a folklore hero. But since he was a very flamboyant character, and it was a very romantic part of our history, it's very natural that myths would develop. The one that we see all the time is the one about all men being what they call free trappers. The men who had Indian wives and went by themselves, were completely self-contained operations.
There's no question that the bulk of the trappers involved in the fur trade were company men, people who received all of their supplies, all of their weapons, everything that they had was given to them by the company. When they were through at the end of the trapping year and they came to the rendezvous and they turned their furs in, they cleared very little because they were so, it was like almost every morning when you got up, you were a little more heavily in debt to the company.
One of the most important items supplied to the trapper by was his rifle. The rifle traditionally associated with the mountain man is the famous Hawkins. But according to Charles Hanson, that's just another part of the myth.
Well, the most common rifles, of course, were the ones which the American Fur Company imported. They were much cheaper, less than half the price of a Hawken rifle.
The sturdy Henry rifle from Pennsylvania was the weapon probably used by most of the company trappers.
There's a classic example of the clerk on the upper Missouri, right on the river in 1860, writing home to his folks and speaking about himself as a mountain man and other people as mountain men. And when a man in 1850 said that Hawken was a favorite of mountain men or mountaineers, it didn't necessarily mean beaver trappers at all. It's just any man who was out there.
Nevertheless, there were free trappers, as well as trappers who owned controlling interest in their fur companies. These are the men whose independence and exploits earned them individual fame. Leroy R. Hafen is often considered the dean of the American Western history. He authored a series on the fur trade which included a biography of Jedediah Smith.
While the two men were going into well-known country to the north, into Montana, he says, why not explore this southwest region? It may be just as rich.
Smith, with 15 men, left the Salt Lake region, and he traveled down the route that I-15 would take about 130 years later. When he came to the High Sierra Mountains of California, he found that the streams were rich with beaver. And later, when he returned, he came back over the hazardous Nevada desert and joined the rendezvous at Bear Lake. So Jedediah Smith, you might say, became, in his quest for beaver, one of the great explorers of the 19th century West.
I always thought it was interesting with all of the scrapes that Jed Smith went through on those two ambushes in California, one in Oregon, when he was mauled by the grizzly bear and lost his ear, that he finally retired from the business and then ends up getting killed on the...
He decided to go into the freighting business to Santa Fe on the old Santa Fe Trail. And On the first trip out, he was out scouting the country, and he ran alone into a little party of Indians who attacked him, and he was killed there at age 32.
The bearded mountain man was the invention of painters who came later, such as Frederick Remington. Remington made his sketches 50 years after the close of the era. Artists like Alfred Jacob Miller, who was at the Rendezvous, show mountain men with small beards or none at all. Company ledgers record sales of shaving soap and shaving implements belonging to mountain men survive today. Beards were not yet in fashion, and they have been added to our image of the mountain man to make him just a little more colorful and uncivilized than he really was. If a mountain man wanted an Indian bride, you can bet your bottom dollar he was clean shaven. By the time the rendezvous ended and the trappers returned to the mountains, autumn was coming, and the yearly cycle was about to begin again. It was a cycle destined to repeat itself only 16 times. Already in the early 1830s, forces were at work in faraway places that would shortly end the fur trade. Matter of fact, the last rendezvous was held in 1840.
The end of the beaver trade came just in time to save the beaver from extinction, but it was not due to any high-minded conservation ideas on the part of the trappers.
The trappers, of course, didn't realize what was happening. But all through the 1830s, the gradual rising price of beaver as the world supply got less and less led to experimentation by manufacturers, and eventually they developed hat making to the point where they could use a lower grade of fur than the beaver for making hats. But the big breakthrough occurred when they discovered that the nutria of South America had a fur that was very much like that of the beaver. Why, you could buy a nutria pelt in Buenos Aires for 25 cents, which was nearly half as big as a beaver skin that cost $5 in St. Louis. In 1836, there was 1 million nutria pelts sold on the London market. And when the silk hat was perfected and became fashionable, even the carriage organized trade deserted the beaver hat, and suddenly there is no demand for beaver whatsoever.
There were diehards who stayed in the mountains and made it a way of life. After all, meat was free, and you could make a living of some kind in the wilderness.
Most of the men left the Central Rockies. Many settled in California, and others went to work for the government as guides and Indian agents. They came in search of wealth and adventure. Adventure they found plenty, but wealth eluded all but a few. They departed just ahead of the great influx of settlers who would find their wealth in the opening up of the American West. Settlers who would use the very trails pioneered by the mountain man. But if they have left any other mark of their presence, it is solely on the landscape of the imagination. In the wilderness where they lived and died, the testimony of the mountains is they were never here.